Welcome, Amartya. So, for everyone, Amartya is a very good friend of mine with whom I did my master's as well. Amartya has a very unique background of having master's and PhD in physics, and now he's working as a process and technology development engineer at Intel. So, before I move forward, I would love to hear it from Amartya because his LinkedIn profile is so diverse that it's very much challenging for me to put everything together in a series. So let's hear it from Amartya. Amartya, welcome again.
Hey Jay, thanks for having me here. I'm basically like a process engineer currently at Intel Corporation. So my master's was in physics, that is true, but then I moved to uh doing a PhD in electrical engineering basically. And the story behind that is a little bit like not in my hands in the sense like my advisor, she moved from chemistry and physics to like chemistry and electrical engineering, and she moved universities. So I moved with her, and hence I got a degree in electrical engineering. After that, currently I'm working as a process engineer at Intel Corporation. What that basically means is in chip fabrication, in any semiconductor chip fabrication, you have like different processes like lithography, etch, thin film deposition, etc. So I am controlling like a section of that etch for making those transistors which come into your chips, which make up like the processors of computers. A little bit more about the job is basically there are two roles in the job, like manufacturing and development. So at Intel currently, I do both of these sections, and the manufacturing part is controlling the current manufacturing of Intel's product line, making sure that everything is running smoothly, looking for gaps to improve the efficiency of the product line, for example. And the development side is basically working on improving Intel's new and upcoming product line. Because right now, as we are shrinking transistors, we need to work like close to atomic scales. And then you have to like navigate through those challenges of how to make the devices while keeping high performance and yield as these products get ready to hit the market. So that is basically what I am doing in my current job role at Intel.
Wonderful. So, my next question would be, was it anywhere related to your academics background till now?
Well, yes, I won't say it's directly related to my academic background, like in terms of what I did in my MSc, but my PhD project was in device physics. So a part of it was like making semiconductor chips or improving or making like nanostructural devices. And in that regard, I needed to learn a lot of things for making those structures and for making those different devices, and that kind of translated to what I'm doing right now at Intel. So when I started my PhD, my like target was always working for a like big corporation like Intel. So in that sense, this did work out really well for me.
So, that was my next question as well. Because I remember when I used to tell people about you, oh, I have a friend. I won't be very surprised that he'll end up becoming dean of some academic department and everything like that.
Yeah.
But from the very beginning of your PhD, you used to keep telling us that, okay, this is what I'm planning to do in future. I want to get into some industry rather than going to a traditional pathway of postdoc. Somehow your journey was planned by many factors, like your professor moved universities and you went along with her. So did you choose your PhD in a certain way, or just it happened by chance?
I would say that I did choose industry like right from maybe like year one or year two of my PhD. I wouldn't say that was the plan right when I joined the PhD, but I was always interested in the application side of physics. So I chose my master's project based on that. I worked on semiconductor devices at that time, and I continued doing that during my PhD. So I chose a group where I could work with nanostructures, nanostructural devices, where I could explicitly work on fabrication of those devices. I was not interested in like the theoretical application of those. So I think like when I went into my PhD, I was more or less prepared to see whatever I'm doing have an outcome into the market. And in the sense, when you're doing a PhD, at least for me, all the things I'm making, like devices I'm making, they won't necessarily like go out. I always wanted to like work somewhere where I could actually produce something which would directly go into the market, which where I could see people using that. Intel seemed like a great option for me in that sense because I could make things which would be used like by millions of people. So that's actually was very appealing to me. So I think like right from year 2 or year 3 of my PhD, I had an idea of where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. It helped, like working towards that, it actually helped.
Tell me a little bit about your brief stint at CGG. What was that? I believe that's different from what Intel does. So, what was your role at CGG? I think it's a geophysics company. I believe so.
Correct. So CGG was a very different company. What CGG basically used to do, they are a company which makes 3D images of the subsurface of Earth. And they then produces images, give them to oil corporations, and oil corporations and then can decide where they can potentially dig to get oil. So my role in CGG was kind of data analysis. So what we used to do is we used to take live images which are produced from ships. And so to give an idea of what happens is ships basically send sonar waves into the sea, and the reflection of that is then taken and we convert those waves into an image. So we have to analyze that, remove noise, remove like interference from waves or animals in the sea, and convert that into an image of the subsurface. And those images are then analyzed to see where possibly there can be an oil deposit under the earth's surface. Basically, like we had meetings every week with our clients to show them those images, what they exactly wanted, talk to them, give an example of or give suggestions of where the oil might possibly be.
Where does your PhD work comes in here? Because as you said, you were into mostly into data analysis for CGG. For Intel, it's pretty much, as you said, it's an extension of your PhD work, kind of. But for CGG, what it sounded to me that it's a bit different. So did you pick up any new skills before applying for the job, or there was a training phase in that program?
I would say like every job has a training phase, at least every job which I know of around people has a certain particular training phase. It's not a direct extension of your PhD usually. What I mean in that sense is what we do in our PhD is a very like niche thing. It's not usually like something which can translate to what currently industries are looking for in the market. But what industries are looking for is your particular skills. For example, like in your PhD, you look at a lot of data, you analyze a lot of data, you understand the correlation between numbers, between whatever you're trying to plot, and do a lot of data analysis in that sense. So CGG basically looks for PhDs who have done this sort of data analysis and who have an experience in looking at data. They in their interview process they like vet through PhD folks looking for how much they know regarding that. And that's the thing, like geophysics is a very different field, but um, they they trained us, made us pass through a training period, and once that's done, it's only your data analysis skills which are required from your PhD.
So would you like to
So
name a couple of data analysis skills that you use there? Was there any programming involved or any new upcoming artificial intelligence algorithm that you might be using?
not really. So from what I've seen for these companies, they have their own software. So they teach you how to run those software. And if you have some basic programming skills, maybe something like Python or maybe C++, some basic programming skills, you can pretty much use those softwares. But after that, it's kind of like just navigating through their softwares, understanding how to use those and use the particular applications from those softwares to generate your results. So, short answer to your question, no, I did not need to have any additional or any particular data skills, but having some basic programming idea is very useful.
So, Amartya, another reason for this podcast is, according to me, I might be wrong totally, that there are not enough academics jobs right out there. So the competition that's there is too much. That's the feeling that I keep getting from different postdocs, different PhDs, and they are looking to transition towards industry. From year 2 or year 1 in your PhD, you were kind of sure that you want to get into industry. But was it really smooth the way it sounds?
Not really. And there are some reasons for that. Firstly, I graduated in peak COVID time. So during COVID, companies were basically not hiring. So it took a long time to find a job. And secondly, I made multiple mistakes in my job application process, which I wasn't aware of. For example, the biggest mistake which I made was I never did an internship. And that's like, if you're looking for an industry job after your PhD, that's a huge disadvantage because companies are looking for someone who has some industrial experience. Like, if you have some industrial experience, it's easier to apply for jobs and get jobs. The mistake number two, which I did, was I applied for jobs online. I went to LinkedIn, I saw online application for the jobs, and I applied for them. And it took a long time. I applied for, I think, about 80 jobs, and I maybe got replies for two of them before I actually learned that that is not the way to get interviews for big corporations. It is crucial to build your network. And even though I had planned that I wanted this industrial job, I wanted to go to Intel, I couldn't land an interview because they don't look at your online applications. It took me a while to realize that. After that, I started building my network and like reaching out to people, but it was a little bit late. So
So when you said you started building up your networks, what do you mean by that? Did you start cold emailing people that, okay, I'm Amartya with this background, interested to have a chat with you or something? So how did it happen for you?
yeah, I generally like whichever companies I wanted to go to, I found their profiles, some of the profiles in LinkedIn, some similar kind of roles as to what I wanted. I generally send them a message, ask them for an informational interview. Hey, can we talk for 30 minutes about this, about your line of work? I'm interested in what you do. And if they replied positively, then like set up an interview, talk to them, and ultimately ask them if they're willing to submit your resume to a particular position or job. I would say this, like, for me at least, the biggest barrier was like asking them, hey, can you please submit my resume to the job? And I felt like, oh man, I should not be doing this. It's like very cheap, like asking unknown strangers to submit resumes for me. But someone then told me that, hey, we get money for this. So every company pays your employees if they can find someone who accepts the job offers after submitting their resume. So there's nothing to be ashamed of, because, and it's not less. For example, at Intel, if you refer someone for a job, you get like thousands of dollars. So
Wow.
it's something which like they benefit also. So that's another thing you have to kind of get over.
So Amartya, if you'll see your experience that you just shared, I myself is hearing for the first time. You see that no one teaches us these things during our whole academic career. Start from masters, bachelors. Everything is okay. This is the formula. This is how you derive it. This is the application of it. But surviving outside academics is another game. And there are people who are really good at it. They have networks at their fingertips. But with you, as I said, you learned after applying for like 80 jobs. And hats off to you in that manner, because when I look at you, I was like, okay, perfect marks during masters and journal proficiency medal as well, right? And best project award. And I was like, okay, for him it should be easy. But when it comes to the real world, I think it's more about how well you can portray yourself out there rather than throwing 100 of certificates, papers on their face. Okay, this is what I am, but no one is interested in that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But I would also say this, like, I found out during at the application process that undergrad, your grad, if you have a PhD, it really doesn't matter how much your grades are, how much your marks are. If you're going into academics, your PhD and your application of your work is what matters. So if you have like papers, if you have like people who have cited your papers, that's what pushes you up the ladder, not your academic achievements, which people are interested in.
That's one thing I noticed too. The recent guest that I interviewed got her like tenure track position right after her PhD, and she had like decent number of papers, not something unrealistically high, but like good enough. 4 5 first author papers during her PhD, and in the meantime, she also got involved as co-PI and PI in many grants.
Wow.
So when I talked to her, she was like, from second year in her PhD, she was very clear she wants to get into academics. And she started learning all behind the scenes information. Okay, if I want to get grant from this organization, I need to develop my proposal according to them. I can't be selfish there and say, okay, if I won't do this, I'm not going to apply there because that will hurt you in the end. So she graduated in June 2022 and she started working in August 2022.
Wow.
So you can see that uh, on papers you're too good, but what's that key factor that we are missing? In your case, I understood because you're transitioning to a different background, so you need to build network. But in academics, it might be a different game. You need to know the game of winning grants because
Yeah.
if you won't bring money to the university, I'm not sure that many big universities will be interested in hiring you. Samartha, thanks a lot for that particular information. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure it will help many people out there. You kind of covered everything from my questions. Okay. So, Amartya, the next question would be, was being a PhD helpful to you in any way? Or do you think it will help you in a long run down the road?
I think like having a PhD is useful for sure. I definitely, it has helped me, yes. But it depends on what your life goals are. For me in particular, it helped me for two reasons. Firstly, it's a huge boost for immigration while staying in the US. Like you have multiple avenues of getting uh, your green card, which is essential if you are looking to stay here long term, stay in the US long term. So that is one big boost. The second big boost is having a PhD is what opens up research line jobs for you. I've seen like if you have like a bachelor's or a master's at maybe companies like Intel, you might not always be able to do research oriented jobs. It might just be more of like, I don't know how to put it, but it might just be jobs where you are uh, doing a lot of tool work and not enough of research work. Let's put it that way.
So, Amartya, since you had the experience of interviewing at two completely different companies, if you have to summarize and walk us through the interview process, how it actually looks like. It starts with the application, or in your case, maybe the networking as well. So, how did it go for you?
For CGG, basically what happened was I talked to a recruiter, and that was after I started building my network. I talked to a recruiter, and she helped set up an interview, and I interviewed there. So at Intel, what happened is it was the same thing. I talked with the recruiter, he set it up, and hence I got the interview. Now, the interview processes are quite different between the two companies. So for CGG, the interview was mostly problem solving, and they had a very brief discussion about what my work during my PhD was. But being a geophysics company, they were looking for someone who could adapt to the situation, like who could solve problems, who could do some sort of data analysis directly. So they gave me some data on spot, they gave me some
Okay.
mathematical problems on spot, and asked me to solve them. It's quite similar to what you would do if you had a bachelor's or a master's, and if you're interviewing for a job, you would get some problems to solve, and that's what happened. And they had a first phone interview and a video interview. In the phone interview, they asked me some small mathematical problems. They asked for the answers. I solved them and gave it to them. And during the video interview, they actually like showed me some images and asked me to analyze them and give them some answers and feedbacks based on that. And that was the CGG interview. For Intel, it was a lot different. It was more created to help a PhD person. So they talked about my research, what I did, and because my research is directly translates to what Intel does, it was a pretty good discussion with the interviewing folks. Like they asked me question about what the different tools I use. They asked me different questions about the work I did, how I did that work, and it was a pretty intense discussion. But the additional part which Intel also had, which CGG did not have, was a behavioral interview. So that interview section is basically trying to judge how good you are with people. And this is an important skill which I think you are not usually always aware of in academics, but your soft skills which you develop, like how to lead teams, how to collaborate with different teams, how to manage maybe a team or lead a project. These are some of the soft skills which are necessary for academic jobs, and a lot of big corporations look for that. So the behavioral component focused on that, like trying to understand how I am leading a team or how I'm working with other people or how I am in understanding conflict with different people. And in that sense, this interview was quite different from what CGG was looking for.
So were you aware in any way that you're going to face such kind of intense interview session? Because as you said, like you had to go through behavioral questions, then solving math problem instantly. So were you aware of these things from the beginning, or did you prepare for it in any way?
Yes, I was aware of that from the beginning. So if I just like a simple something like searching on Google shows like people who have interviewed maybe like on Glassdoor or something, people have mentioned what kind of interviews they usually face when either at CGG or at Intel. So when I went into the interview at CGG, I knew they would ask mathematical based questions, and I knew that they would ask things like based on probability, for example, something which you did back in class 12 or back in school, basically.
Bayes theorem.
Yeah, exactly. So I knew they were going to ask those, so it helped like prepare. If I went blindly into that interview, I would not have managed to do that. At Intel, I talked with people who have interviewed before, and that is a key thing I would say. Like whenever you're going for an interview with a company, it's key that you understand what to expect. Otherwise, you're going in blind. And in an interview, at least in from my point of view, you should not go in blind. So talking with people prepared me to know how that interview process will be. For example, I knew that at Intel I would be interviewed by a team of people who would listen to my interview and who would listen to my PhD presentation and then ask me questions based on that. And I knew they had a behavioral section, and then I went to these different websites. For example, I personally use something called Big Interview, which helps you prepare for the behavioral section of it. It tells you like guides you through different questions of which are related to behavioral questions and helps like um, prepare for some of the questions which are asked there. And believe me, a lot of the questions are similar because at the end of the day, um, the behavioral part, the questions, there are not a lot of things which they can ask about, like not a lot of common questions which they can ask about to gauge how you are as a person. So these kinds of things help.
Wonderful. So my next question would be more sort of a generic question, which will cover any suggestions for PhDs, how to keep them mentally and skill-wise ready for a different career path?
So that's a pretty loaded question, and I think like it's going to be a lengthy answer if I give like my own opinion on it. So I think understanding which line you want to do early on is a big benefit. So do you want to go towards academics? Do you want to go towards industry? That decision should be made by maybe year 3 or
something into your PhD, like not in year 5 of your PhD is what I'm saying, because there are some preparations which you need to do. You mentioned about your friend who started looking into different like grants and those sorts of things, like how to apply for grants because she knew wanted to go into academics. So that's what you need to do if you go into academics. If you want to go into industry, like the path which I followed was not a good one. So you probably would want to like start looking at LinkedIn and different profiles of people pretty early in your PhD cycle. You don't need to even spend a lot of time, maybe like spending 30 minutes a week on this. Try to understand what kind of job roles suit you, what kind of job roles you want. And I will say this, what you do in your PhD is a pretty niche topic, probably. It might be a very small um, thing which you're doing, and most likely it will not directly translate into whatever you're looking for in an industrial job. For some people, it does do, yes, but it's not always that case. And that sort of thing, like having a transformation agility, you can call it, like to adapt to conditions which you need to or the skills which you need to for a particular job is crucial. That is what a lot of industries want you to have. So even in your industrial job you might need to shift to a different role while in that job. So that adaptability and the ability to transform from one section to another is something you have to prepare yourself to be, and these are all sorts of mental preparation. Secondly, I would say the job search is a mentally hugely exhausting process. There will be time when you'll be at least I was very frustrated with the entire thing, and it takes like months. It's at least a 6 month project to like look for jobs and land interviews. The hardest part of starting post your PhD is landing your first interview. If you land an interview, it's most likely as a PhD you are going to succeed. You have the skills to succeed, but getting that first interview is very difficult, especially if you have no industrial experience. If you're interested in going down the industrial line, talk to people, build your network, and have an ability to market yourself. This is key to getting jobs in the US, especially. Like, it's not something which is taught to us during our PhD, but you need to like sell your work. Your work might not be like how shall I put it? Your work might not be like mind blowing to you, but the way you present your work has to show that it's pretty impressive what you have done. And that ability to like make more of your work than what you think it is crucial when you're interviewing for any jobs. Um, Additionally, like I talked about networking, I talked about the transformation agility, I talked about the ability to market yourself. The other thing is from your PhD, you learn a lot of soft skills, and those are important. So those should be important both in terms of your academic line and your industrial line. And those soft skills are something which you should develop regardless of which pathway you want to choose, whether you want to go to academics or networking. So I would suggest like collaborate with people, try to lead some projects, try to work with all kinds of different people. In a job, you might be working with people from different backgrounds. Learn how to navigate through those systems, how to adjust to the system so as properly lead or properly collaborate. So, yeah, these would be the primary things which I would suggest to get ready as you move for different career paths.
So during this conversation, Amartya, I got intrigued by the fact that how does a typical day in industry for you look like? Because in PhD, it's like a never-ending marathon, right? Even on Saturdays, you'll be writing some paper, correcting some revisions, and everything like that. But how is it for you in industry?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Jay. And the reason I say this is it's not something which I did personally, but one thing which you should always be aware of is your work-life balance, especially going into industry. And most companies have some policy regarding that work-life balance. So usually the way a typical day looks for me is, yes, like our PhD mindset doesn't let us maybe get out of work like typically from those 9 to 5 jobs. But usually I would say like if I'm done by everything, I stop work at 6, and weekends I generally do not work at all unless there's some sort of emergency going on for which I do need to open my computer and do something. Otherwise, and the company also encourages this, like, do not exhaust the rest. Family is important, spending time outside work is important. So that Intel actively like promotes. Hence, like, even when I do recently, if I do some networking with some people, I would generally like talk to people about how their work-life balance is and what kind of uh, benefits they get from their company, which allows them to uh, lead that same work-life balance. So it's very different from academics, and that's something which I like. Again, it might not be true for everyone out there, but as you mentioned, PhD takes you or makes you work like through weekends often. In industry, mostly it's not like that. You have your Monday to Friday works. You can get up when you are done with your work. As long as you're meeting expectations, no one will question you about like working like less in a day or working or not working through weekends.
My next question would be, did that phase of PhD where things get super challenging, especially during thesis writing and looking for jobs, did that help you in any way to perform better in industry?
I wouldn't say that thesis writing by itself helped
Mhm.
because at least in my experience, I was writing my thesis during COVID, and my job is basically an in-lab job, so all labs were closed. So during my thesis writing, I was basically just working from home, writing my thesis and looking for jobs. So it wasn't a lot of value addition in terms of the skills I gained. But what did help previously was, or if you even call it thesis, was how to write papers and how to present your data. That was a key thing because knowing how to present your data, especially when you're going to a higher level meeting, and that's true for whether you're in academics or industry, like presenting your data in a way which shows good benefits while keeping, um, while not like overselling your data because decisions are being made on that is a key factor. Like paper writing and thesis writing actually helped me in doing that, I would say.
So we'll summarize this interview now. Amartya, trust me, you have no idea the information that you have put out there through this interview will gonna help many people out there, maybe including me in future. But
Hope
this
so.
this is something like a blueprint of someone migrating from PhD, and there's nothing wrong with looking for other options. If you're not very comfortable with your maybe the work culture of academics, it can be like it can be a little bit challenging at some stage, especially in the early phases of your career.
Mhm.
So your interview will definitely help many people out there. So the last question in the end, did you think that doing a PhD was is still worth it in 2023?
I would say yes, I believe so. The reason behind that is I already mentioned, I think, this before, but a PhD helps in two things. One is, if I leave aside immigration side for now, the first thing is it helps like boost you up in the kind of jobs you're trying to look. You are basically now aiming at more research oriented jobs, and it kind of helps move towards that path more easily. So the assumption here is, do you need a PhD? No. Are you interested in a PhD? Maybe. And if you are interested in a PhD and you want to go for it, then the assumption here is you are more interested in like doing some sort of research. So that's why I said that if you are interested in doing research, you need a PhD to get to those kinds of jobs. The second thing is it gives you a boost up the pay scale. If you have a master's and you have a PhD, then there's a big difference in the pay scale between what a master's get and what a PhD gets. And at least that's true for the companies I've worked for. I don't know whether it's universal, of course, but these two primary things are quite important. Again, I reiterate this once more. Is it necessary? No. You can easily get a job. It depends on what your life goals are. If you need a job or if you want to directly go into industry, having a bachelor's or a master's is enough. And a lot of people work in the same company I do having just those degrees. But if your life goals align with like doing research sort of thing, then like a PhD is what you should do. So I know that's kind of an ambiguous answer, but my point is that it's not absolutely necessary if it's about what you want.
Because the idea is there's no point of complaining about PhD after getting into it, right?
Yeah.
Because you can get a job without even doing it.
Hmm.
So if you do it, it will definitely help in some way, as you said, in terms of pay scale, in terms of scope of jobs that you can apply for. So
Yeah.
it's my personal say as well. It's definitely worth it. I'm really happy that I did it. I'm not sure about others. So Amartya, thank you so much for accepting my request for this interview.
Of
It
course.
will definitely help many people out there. And again, good luck for your journey. And hopefully, we'll come up with another interview where we can go a little bit more into details of maybe job application procedure.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you
Jay.
so much, Amartya.
Thank you for
Uh,
having me here. It was great talking with you and discussing this. And yeah, I hope it can help. Even if it helps like even one person, I'll be happy for that.